It's Seth's first day.
You're live.
All right. Oh, I thought all the TVs went off.
Go.
I thought all the TVs went off. I want to make sure that you remove the logo.
Oh, we're losing feed. I don't know what's going on. I guess we're going to cut this one early today.
All right. Welcome to OnSet. I am Daniel Norton here in Adorama. Thanks for coming out on this very cold day. Marissa's here. Not her mom. Mom,
Yeah.
it's not that cold. She's on the live stream, and you know it. You know you could have been here. Anyways, today we're going to talk about the, oh, sorry, this is Marissa. That's over here on the Mighty Mix. I've lost track of everything because the logo on the screen.
You're just
Everyone
filling
at home
time.
does not.
You're just filling time because I know it. All right.
I'm just, listen, I don't have much to say today, so we're trying to make this, they pay me by the minute. No, today we're going, coming into the year, we decided to roll back a little bit and do some kind of back to basic stuff. And I mentioned last time, I don't know if I mentioned it when I was live, but to the audience, that I see this t-shirt that pops up all the time, usually on Instagram, or photographers wearing it, where it's like, M is professional or some kind of dumb thing like that. And, and it makes me think about how years ago I was here and this person comes in and they're like, hey, I'm a wedding photographer and I really need to learn how to shoot in manual. I was like, oh, okay. How long have you been doing it? Many years, right? So are your clients happy? Yeah. What are you doing now? Well, I shoot in program automatic. Okay. Looking at the work, it's all good. I'm like, why do you need to shoot in manual? Well, someone told me I wasn't professional. I'm like, was that person working? Because you're working, your clients understand it. Do you understand how to use your camera? That's what's important. The modes on the camera are there for a reason. You can use them or not. I mean, when you watch me do these demos, I'm mostly locked in a manual because of what I'm doing. But each mode has its purpose and reason that you might want to know how to use it. So we're going to walk through the different modes on your camera, the main ones anyways that are on most cameras. Some cameras have additional ones like portrait mode and stuff. I'm not going to get into that. We're going to talk about the main ones, which are, let's see if I can do this correctly. I have to hold it and cover my face, but also have it on the thing. Did I do it?
You're on.
All right. All right. So right there, boom. We got program automatic, which we've got aperture priority, a shutter priority, whoop, and manual. Right? And that's all of them. Okay. I can't read it because my face was being covered by the thing. So what does this even mean? So obviously manual should be the most obvious one. That means you're basically setting everything on the camera, everything being your ISO, although you can, that's something we'll talk about, your shutter speed and your aperture. That's what we're mostly talking about manually. So you're working in a studio, you're using an external light meter, things aren't changing. You can set your camera up manually and it will stay locked in where you are, right? That's an advantage to shooting in manual. And there's plenty of reasons to do that. If I'm running around shooting something in changing conditions, let's say an event, that could work, right? Especially if I have a flash, let's say on my camera and I'm using TTL, which by the way is changing exposure as I shoot, right? And keep track of the space. Or it might work if I just don't want anything to change at all. But generally speaking, it's good for that. If you're doing anything where things might be changing, then your modes help you there. What they're gonna do is aperture priority will lock in the aperture where you put it. The idea there is that I need this aperture. The shutter speed isn't that important to me for what I'm doing, right? Then you have shutter priority. I need this shutter speed or faster or slower or whatever. Aperture isn't as important to me. Program automatic is kind of the one that, we used to joke sometimes to call it professional mode, right? Which is funny because a lot of professionals use it. I just talked about that. A lot of event photographers. Program automatic will analyze the scene and give you a good balance. It will change the aperture and the shutter speed, and you can set parameters on your camera to keep them within, right? So program automatic is kind of like, you don't really have a preference, you just wanna make sure you get a good exposed shot, but you want control, which we're gonna talk about. There is also, which I forgot to mention, auto, okay? Auto is auto, right? Auto is if you just got your camera and you're just trying to get out there and shoot something and you really don't know much technically, fine. Auto is you give it to your friend to take a quick snapshot of somebody. Auto will just do everything automatically. It's gonna, in many cameras, it will turn off a lot of the custom settings. So it will just keep everything at the most basic setting. It turns your camera into effectively a point and shoot. So auto is useful for those reasons, right? If I'm out shooting and I go, oh, I wanna get a shot of the crew, and you've got somebody there who maybe is a PA that doesn't know much or whatever, you could say, hey, turn the camera on auto, hand it to him, say, get a shot of us, right? Better than using your phone and you get that shot, right? But we're not going to talk about auto because that's about all you need to know. Let's talk about the other modes. And in order to make this kind of more visual and take some pictures, I'm going to use a constant light instead of a flash at first, because I think that's where we're going to use a lot of these modes the most. First, I need my tripod. This is a 3-pod, by the way. They give me 7 cents every time I mention that, so cha-ching. Question.
No, Armis is saying professional. In my days, it was panic mode.
Hack mode.
Panic mode.
Panic mode. Oh, panic because you weren't sure? So here's the thing. Program automatic, again, is going to give you an idea of a basic shot, right? You're running, you turn, let's say you are doing a journalistic thing and you have to turn your camera on and grab a shot quickly. Again, that's why you might want it. What you get with P, which we're going to talk about actually at the end, so I'm not going to get right into it, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it, is you get the ability to use exposure compensation. That's going to be key here. Exposure compensation is basically you allowing the camera to make its decision as to what it feels is the right exposure, but then you're changing that based on your knowledge of the scene, right? So something's heavily backlit, you're going to adjust for that. You just want a different vibe, you're going to adjust for that. That's what that's for. But let's start off with the most basic stuff. Let's start with aperture priority, because that's where I am. So aperture priority, I find, is the most useful when you need to get enough depth of field, let's say in a product photography shoot. But you're on a tripod, and let's say you're using a constant light. So you don't care about your shutter speed, right? Basically, the shutter speed could be anything. You're on a tripod, but you know you need f8 or 16 or whatever to get enough depth, right? So you're going to set your aperture priority, and then you're going to let the camera decide for the rest. You could also set it at the widest aperture because, you know, you paid for an f2 lens. You want to show it off, you know, you could do that. This is a Nan light, by the way. It says right on it. It also says Seth on it, so I guess it sets Nan lights.
It's going to be broken by the end of the night, so no worries.
Probably. Yeah. All right, so this is just a LED light, just to give us a little bit better light, you know, than this. This setup here is set up so that I look good looking at the cameras, not so much so the model looks good. So yeah, you can kill a little bit of it, I guess. So if we want to start with, again, with aperture priority, let's say, for instance, actually a better use of this would be, like I say, product photography is a good place where we want to keep more depth of field. But let's say I don't want a lot of depth of field. Let's say I want to make sure it stays closed down. That's what I care about. What I can do is set my aperture priority at something that's more open, right? So let me get myself tethered here. This is an f4 lens. Let's see. So I'm going to set, by the way, right now, I'm at 100 ISO. I'm not going to go into auto ISO yet because that's a little bit of a little extra, if you will, which is very nice, by the way. Auto ISO really changed the game for a lot of things. So I'm in aperture priority, like I said. Oh, I think I just took a random picture. Look at that. So soft and dreamy. You can subscribe to my course on Instagram to learn how to take these ethereal images. Okay. All right. So I'm in aperture priority, but I'm shooting Marissa. And I know that you're much better off in shutter priority when you're shooting Marissa. Right? Why? Right? And Marissa knows that. All right. So I've got my light set up. And basically, I want to shoot more wide open because I want to, let's say, get the background blurry. So maybe we should point you this way. Let's put the store behind you. Yeah. All right. So come this way a tiny bit. All right. So basically, I got the store behind Marissa. And if I want to keep it as out of focus as possible, I'm going to want to open the lens up as much as possible. So this is an f4 lens, so I'm going to open it at f4. When I do that, I'm getting a shutter speed now of 1/25 of a second, right? Which is not particularly fast. So if I want to do that, I can say, and I'm not changing my my ISO, I can say, all right, we're just going to want to be still, right? I'm on a tripod, so let's remain relatively still. And we take our shot, right? Now, if I wanted to, and that looks fine, but what we can see here is it cares about her, right? So it's using the meter in my camera, it cares about Marissa, which is why the store is a little bit dark, right? If I needed to compensate, let's say I wanted it to be brighter or darker, I could use my exposure compensation. So again, it'll change my shutter speed, not my aperture, right? So it's telling me that I want, what would I say, 25th of a second. And I'm gonna look up my camera there, it's exposure compensation, boop. And I can dial it, you can't see you can't tell I'm doing this, right? So, yeah, can we do that? Yeah, will that show the? Right, so let's say I look at this and I'm like, oh, you know what? I don't like it. Obviously it's perfect, so I don't have to really want to change it, but I could actually dial in my exposure compensation, and what will happen is, as I dial it in, like I'm turning it down now, -1 stop, it's gone to 1/50th of a second, right? So now I'm telling the camera, hey, you know, give me a little bit of a darker image, but a faster shutter in this case, right? So, what happened?
I wish that would shut off.
Yeah, as soon as you took the shot, I agreed, yeah. So again, if I look at it and I want to compensate, this is the one thing we have to remember. Whenever you are using any of the modes that are more automatic in your camera, this exposure compensation is where you make the judgment, right? It's telling me the top one is right, right? I was like, nah, that's too bright for me. So I dialed in some negative exposure compensation, which basically means that while I have that dialed in, it's always going to make the image a little bit darker than it thinks is correct. And again, with Marissa, who is very shiny, or not shiny, but very glowy, she's like me, she's very reflective. You know, that works. That's probably too dark. So maybe I put in like, you know, maybe just 1/3 of a stop. So I come in and we can dial that in. But there's basically a button on the top of my camera that has a little plus minus. You hold that down and you dial it. Right now I am at -1/3 of a stop. So it's there, boom. And now it's going to dial in a little bit darker than the first shot, but lighter than the second one, right? Now, advantage to this, right, over, let's say, manual, is that if you're not lighting the subject and you're running around, it's just always going to make that decision for you. I don't have to think about it every time I go. If I leave the camera in manual at these settings and I walk over here to photograph you, it's going to be too dark because you're not standing near this light, right? So it removes me having to think about that. But I've made the decision on what aperture I always want, which is f4, because I want to keep it shallow. More likely, you're going to want more depth of field. That's why you would want to use aperture priority. So let's say we have Marissa and we have a thing. What could this thing be? Maybe the C-stand?
Oh, could be Seth.
No, cannot be Seth. And we want to keep, back up a little bit?
You want to, I'll tell you what, I'll just run the pizza box behind it.
Okay, there you go, perfect. That's perfect. That's going to put a pizza box behind. Now, it's New York. We have pizza. It's a thing. They also have it in Chicago, I guess. I'm not sure. I've heard so. It's like thicker, you know. So they tell me. So we've got Marissa, and we want to not just have her in focus with the f4, but we want the pizza box in focus, right? So, not that we don't like you guys, but you know. So, when I look at this, I can see through the camera that's out of focus. Right? Let me live view me. Yeah.
Dan,
I know.
you need a budget for our assistant.
We do. Okay, so if we want to keep, you know, Canon used to have this amazing mode. I don't know if they do anymore, but that's not going to have it. Where, I don't know what camera I'm talking to. I'm going to do this one. Where you would focus on one item, and then you focus on a second one, and it would give you the right aperture, so both would be in focus. I thought that was the coolest mode. I don't think they do it anymore. But that was back in the film photography days. So again, very useful mode. If what we're going to have to do here is go, well, I know f4 is not going to give me that depth of field. I could look at the range and the lens, but let's just say we're just going to go for like f11. So I'm going to dial in f11. And again, now it's going to give me an appropriate shutter speed, which is 1/4 of a second, right? So I'm going to focus on Marissa. What happened? Did you move? Yeah, you can. Yep. Is the drawback there? Right. Think Marissa. So, right, and we've got, I probably should have done it at f4 too. Let me do it at f4 first so you guys can see. Question.
All right. So Rob in the chat's asking, so in semi-automatic modes, the camera is aiming for 18% gray. Does the metering mode come into play with these semi-automatic modes?
So yes, that's a really, really good question. And yes, and also the answer to the question. Right, your metering mode matters, right? So when you are in these different, anytime your camera meter is being used, it's trying to get that 18% gray. So yeah, your metering mode is going to matter a lot. I mean, I find that with most modern cameras, like you're kind of what they call matrix in Nikon, like kind of the overall metering mode is just really good when you're in any of those modes. I think something like spot metering is trickier in those modes personally, because unless you're locking on a product, because things are moving around too fast to nail it. Though you can set it to be your focus spots, but yes, it 100% matters. Okay, so we can see here that, you know, it's not gonna be perfectly sharp, but you can see the difference between f4 and f11, right? So here we know we want f11 because we want sharpness-ish on the Brooklyn reflector. And in order to achieve that, we just basically set f11 into our camera, and the camera itself will compensate and give us the appropriate shutter speed, which happens to be a, what do we got here?
You read? All right.
Yeah, I'm looking to see it. Looks like we got
One
one third of a second. So 1/3 of a second, you know, is not a whole lot of time. So when you're shooting a person, maybe that's not ideal, right? But we can also use flash, right? We can incorporate flash with these things. So most often you're gonna see.
Question really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Kevin's asking to clarify, during the live view, the pizza box will still seem out of focus.
Right, exactly. During the live view, it's gonna see out of focus because of the live view, yeah. Unless you can close down the lens, which is probably possible.
In live view, you're literally seeing what will be what shot, right? So if he's closing down in the live view, you will see your depth of field change in live view. That's the point of live view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, unlike, let's say, an SLR. That's what your question was. Like in an SLR, you wouldn't see that because, you know, you're not looking through the lens. I mean, you're looking through the lens, but it's always wide open.
Someone's also asking, what aperture do you need to get someone's whole, what aperture do you need to get someone's whole face, nose to hair in focus, but out of focus behind them? Or does it vary with distance to subject? It absolutely varies from distance to subject and focal length of lens mixed with that.
Exactly. The distance to the subject, focal length of lens, which obviously has to do with your framing, your f-stop. What's that?
What was the name of that demo you did where it was like portrait lens? Is that one?
About that?
Yeah.
Where they, I can't remember now. Where you stand, or the most important thing, or I can't remember. Sorry. I did a demo on it though.
I think the name of the demo is the best lens for portraits or something like that. It was like earlier last year he did it, and I was answering that exact question. So.
All right, I don't remember the name of it. So, all right. So here's where you might use flash because, and I'm gonna use non-camera flash. I think this is where we're using these modes more often. Basically, we're gonna use the flash because Marissa is not gonna be able to stand still for 1/3 of a second, right? It's gonna be blurry if we wanna close down like that. But by using flash, we can freeze her motion. And if most of our ambient light is not hitting her, we won't get too much of a blur. I mean, unless we want it. And then you can take my special Instagram course. So, yeah. So we're gonna go back here and I'm gonna say, because F11, let's say F11 wasn't even enough to give us the depth of field we want. Let's go to F16. Let me do this first. I'm changing the exposure compensation. All right. So we're gonna go F16. Oh, apparently I'm gonna take a picture. All right, hold on. All right, so I'm gonna go to F16. And we can see that we're down to, basically, I'm going to do no flash to start off with. And basically what we're getting here is basically that image, right? So again, we're not overpowering the light in the space, we're using it. So she is being exposed at the proper exposure, which is whatever, 1.2, everybody can see she's slightly blurry because she's moving, right? She's not blurry because of depth of field, she's blurry because she's moving. Actually, I'm focused on her. Now, with the flash, assuming it doesn't just go crazy, I'm flashed in TTL, I'm gonna turn it on. And yeah, we're in TTL. Okay, here we go. Okay. All right.
Oh.
Nice. Okay. We've walked past many cables here without killing myself. I'm going to go this way, dodging in. All right. Just in focus. Stand by. Hold still. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're going to get a pop and blur a little bit because we got ambient hitting her, but if she's relatively still. Yeah. Yeah. She's got a lot of ambient light on her. So we could do a couple things. We could turn her away from it if we don't want that. You know, get it off of her face, basically. Oh my God. Many wires. I think I set myself up funny here. So if you're faced with a situation, right, what we can do is we have to think about our subject and where we're set up here. So in order to do this and not have blur on her face, we need to keep her face out of the light as much as possible. So I'm going to have her turn her face this way slightly. More towards me, right there. We'll just do it this way. I'm going to cheat a bit. Now, of course, the camera's going to try to compensate because the metering mode, this is where it comes down to it, because it's going to try to meter her because she's in front, right? So here we have to kind of think about, okay, but we don't want that, right? So here's where I can use my exposure compensation. So it's opening up, right? We know that her exposure was fine at 1/3 of a second. So I'm going to close down my exposure compensation to once. So now I'm down 1.3 stops, okay? Here we go. Oop. Wow, this is really sensitive. All right, I'll turn this. Okay, here we go. Nice. Okay. So now we should have most of the ambient light off her face. Yeah, and we can see that she's sharp here, but where the ambient light is hitting her, you have that little bit of blur, right? We're mixing the ambient with the flash, right? So that's kind of what's happening here. What you got to do is keep her out of the ambient light if you don't want that pop and blur, right? Basically. Yeah, well, nice. So basically, if you're in a space like this where this is your concern, you're typically not with a person, right? You're typically not going to be doing what I'm doing. I'm just kind of showing you how the modes work together. Effectively, what I would do here is I don't want to be shooting so slow of a shutter speed, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my camera so that's not the case. And in that case is where we're going to like do ISO, right? We're going to raise our ISO so that we don't have that issue, right? So I can come in here and I can basically take my ISO, which is at 100 right now, and I can get myself in kind of a safe zone, right? Of where, yeah, sure. Shut that over. Oh, could be. So you're going to go like this. Hold. Here we go. Ready? Hold. Got a little bit of weird composition, but it's okay. No? Look at it. Whoa. Okay. Why the flash go at 10? Okay. All right, here we go. Let me just adjust this because I had a weird composition. All right, so we'll go over here. We're at F16. Hold. Why is PV up? Did you play with the PV? No. No, the flash for some reason is. For some reason, my flash, even though I'm in TTL, is not giving me a good exposure. And that could be because this flash has not been updated. Yeah, well, it's giving me 10. Turn. I'm going to try direct flash, might be better. Oh. Now it's staying at 10 for some reason. Okay, so let's move away from this for a second while we're dealing with the flash. And let's talk about shutter priority or time priority. So remember before I said that if I was shooting Merce, I'd be much better off with time priority, right? If you're shooting a person and you know that you can't basically, and not have that be the case. So if it's just somebody posing for a portrait, it might be a 60th of a second. If they're running, you might have to go 250 or 500, right? And if that's what you care about, because again, I don't necessarily care about depth of field here. I have a plain background if I'm shooting this way, right? Then I can essentially effectively set my shutter speed where I know Marissa won't be blurred. All right.
When you had your ISO at 100, right? Before?
Right now it's at 1600.
Oh,
Yeah.
you raised it. Okay, so I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
I was gonna ask you if it did that automatic because I saw that it's at 1600, but I didn't.
no, I did that. Yeah. Oops. Sorry, I took a bad picture. I did that because I was trying to balance it. I'm not putting anything on auto ISO yet because that's kind of one of those things with insight as to how the other modes work. So I'm kicking in, and I have a feeling that's because I have not used that flash. I'm gonna go switch over my mode, and I'm gonna go to shutter priority.
It's working on my camera. It's giving me detail on my camera.
It was just sitting funny.
I think it's reading your exposure comp.
Oh, well, the exposure comp was underexposed, so that wouldn't make any sense. Okay. Oh, that's not the right frame. All right, so a couple things. I was going to test this to see what happens with the flash because we're having still weird. There we go. That seems better. All right,
Cool.
done. All right, good. Okay, so
The moral of the story is update your firmware
Yep.
before demos. So I was able to update this with my phone,
Yeah.
and it's all right now.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, firmware. That's what it was. Okay, so back to this. So again, we know. I mean, I'm on a tripod, so I'm not overly worried about me moving. But I have a human subject in front of me, right? And people generally are going to be fidgety or they're going to move. So you want to keep your shutter speed up a bit. And I found this is basically just from experience. There's no fixed rule on this. 60th of a second will stop most general movement from a person. If somebody's really moving around, you probably want like about 125. So I'm going to go into shutter priority and I'm going to set my shutter speed at a 60th of a second. And again, from there, I can, I will let the camera pick the rest of it. So it's given me 6.3. I don't have any, let me make sure I'm clearing out any compensation that I have on there, any exposure compensation. I think I have some in here. Yep, I do. Okay, let me get rid of that. Okay, so I'm at 0 exposure compensation. I'm at shutter priority of a 60th of a second because I have a human subject in front of me and I'm on a tripod. I'm at 100 ISO because we're just leaving it there right now to determine. And basically, it's flashing f4 on my screen. That means it's saying I need a aperture that's wider than f4 to get a proper exposure according to my light meter. Okay, so here we need to change the ISO, right? So I'm going to press my ISO button. And I'm going to raise my ISO to 125 instead of 100. Now it's giving me f4. This is what the camera is saying is the correct exposure. I'm not using the flash currently. Okay, so let's take a picture with the ambient light as it would be. This is NAND light. And there you go. That looks pretty good, right? So again, we can, yeah, that's clean, right? So we've got this nice shot. It gave us the right exposure. We're at 60th of a second. And if somehow the light changed, right? I'm going to give myself some leeway here so that we can actually make this work. I'm going to go to a 400 ISO. So I'm only doing this so I have some example to show you. So I'm not pushing myself at the maximum. So let's say we're in a space. You go ahead.
So someone's asking, explain how stabilization doesn't help with motion blur. Basically,
Stabilization doesn't help with motion blur. Stabilization helps with the motion blur of you. Stabilization makes the camera not move. If the subject moves, the subject's moving, right? So the stabilization isn't going to help with that. The only way that it might is if you're doing like a pan or something, and there's certain types of stabilization that you can pan with it. But otherwise, stabilization is for the camera, not for the subject. Is that what they're asking?
I think so.
So it's the same thing as a tripod, basically. Imagine, in fact, if you're thinking about how image stabilization works, the best way to think of it is like a tripod. Basically, image stabilization gives you kind of a tripod. Depending on how good your image stabilization is, it's either like a flimsy tripod or like a good heavy duty tripod, right? If you have 7 stops of image stabilization, that's like a nice tripod, right? You have 1 stop, you're in like a flimsy tripod, you know?
And then someone's asking, shutter priority is fine in the studio. Would you realistically use that on location? You would use it anywhere where the
Shutter priority would be most likely used. I mean, the place that I've seen people use it the most would be sports, right? Somebody's moving, you want to make sure your shutter's locked in. You don't care as much about your aperture because you're generally so far away that you're going to have enough depth of field anyways. And what you're really concerned about is that nice frozen motion. So, you know, the other reason why you might use shutter priority on location is if you want to blur. Let's say you're doing a pan and you know a pan takes a 15th of a second or something like that. I was just doing it the other day, actually. I was out with actually I was out with the Leica and I was doing it manually, but I knew that the pan would take me it was a 15th of a second that I wanted to get the people moving across the street. So I had to manually, because I didn't have the setting on my camera, I had to manually figure out where I needed to be. And it took me several shots to get the right exposure. If I had shutter priority on that camera, I would have just put it in that and got it, right? So here we are, I'm at this is now giving me f8 as a reading, just to give you guys a baseline. So let's say though, we're in this space and I've got a 60th of a second because I know that's as far as because my human's moving. If it gets brighter in here, right, I can take a shot and I'll still stay at a 60th, but it'll change and we should get the same exposure, right? If it gets darker in here, same thing, right? We should always, it's going to keep compensating, keeping the same shutter speed, and we should get a good exposure. Just like with TTL with the flash, will you always get the exact same exposure? Not necessarily, because again, your meter's reading each time. So if people are moving around, different parts of the person's in the shot, how the situation is depending on your metering mode, it may change slightly. That's one reason why, like I said, if you're in the studio and you're set up with constant lights or strobe, oftentimes we will put it in manual. That doesn't mean it's more professional, it just means that that's right for that situation. So if I was walking around the store or we were going to different parts of the store and I was photographing people, I might use shutter priority, right? It's going to give me a good baseline and I'll make sure I freeze the action of anybody standing in front of me. So again, I can change it any way I like. I'll turn this down a bit again. So the other thing we can do here is I could take this and I could use my exposure compensation again. So let's say it's giving me f5 right now. If I wanted to get this to be darker, I can set, let's say, 2 stops of compensation. It's going to give me a dark shot, right? Sometimes we do that because we might want to then use something to fill in, like a flash, right? So we could use a flash to make up the difference, right? So the camera's going to underexpose and the flash will as well, but we can go into the flash now and we can overexpose the flash, right? And that should balance us out. A little bit more. Yeah.
Can we look up more?
No, you're good. I actually didn't balance them exactly because I was afraid the flash was going to blow out. I should have done it because now I'm on 2 stops on both and it's balanced. I didn't trust my TTL. See, there we go. That's what I was always trust your camera. No, so right now I'm underexposing this by 2 stops and overexposing my flash by 2 stops in shutter priority. That way I can get a shot where I've let the background go down darker, but I'm exposing her properly as the flash with our main light, right? If the light changes, right, it should do the same thing. It's going to change for us. We're going to get a different, right? And we still say roughly the same. But what we got there was more depth of field because the aperture changed because our shutter stayed locked in, right? And of course, the power of my flash changed. Does that make sense? This is where we really see the power of this. So when you're using a flash and you're balancing exposure compensation on the camera plus exposure compensation on the flash, and we can go back and forth. And again, this is probably where you're not going to use it as much. If I'm thinking about when I use these things the most, aperture priority I'm going to use most often myself when I'm shooting things like macro, when I'm shooting products or anything still light that's not moving. I'm on a tripod. I want to control my depth of field precisely. That's when I'm using aperture priority, assuming I'm not going to just shoot a manual. If I'm using something moving, right, an athlete or a person that's going around or moving that's energetic, I'm going to use shutter priority. I want a fast enough shutter speed to stop their motion. Whether I have stabilization via a tripod or via my camera, that's bonus. But again, if the person's moving, I need the shutter speed to be fast enough. If you are in a situation where a lot of things are happening and things are changing constantly, that's where program automatic comes in, which is what we're really going to talk about now. So P, which is program automatic. So this is kind of like I said at the beginning, if you're going to hand your camera to somebody that doesn't know that much about cameras and you just want them to frame up a shot and take a picture of you, putting it in regular green box automatic is the best way to go. That way they kind of can't mess it up, right? It's going to give you a decent exposure. There's not a lot of settings they can change. It's just going to work. But you, as a photographer that is either really experienced or wants to gain experience, you're going to want to use P, which is program automatic. The camera is going to decide the shutter speed, the aperture, and then you're going to adjust it using exposure compensation like I just showed you. So if I take my exposure compensation, I zero everything back down, both here and on the flash. Okay. Questions before I get into P? This is kind of the important one.
I think it's the most misunderstood one by far.
And I think this is really the one that most people should be using more than they do, probably. In P mode, the camera is now going to give me, again, I won't use the flash to start with. The camera is now going to give me what it feels is the correct balance of exposure, right? It's going to give me a decently fast shutter speed and a decent middle of the road aperture. It's trying to just get a good shot, right? It's taking everything into account and it's kind of figuring it out. You can also go as so far as to put in auto ISO, which we'll add, and then it'll kind of just do its thing. It'll be closer to the green box, but again, you'll still have the ability to make compensation. So again, here I am. Marissa keeps getting taller on me. All right, so when I look at this, my camera is telling me that the exposure it's suggesting at 400 ISO, because that's where we're at right now, is 1/320th of a second, right, at f4.5, okay? Because it's seeing, right, just a single subject in front of me that I'm relatively close to that's going to be able to focus on, and it doesn't know necessarily that I'm on a tripod. That's a good, safe shutter speed. So if I take this picture, right, we're going to get a nice shot with an N light. Remember, I'm not using the flash right now. You know, it's got enough depth of field for a general portrait. It's got enough shutter speed that she's frozen, and that's pretty good, right? So if I'm walking around an event and I'm shooting, this is going to work for me pretty decently. If I want the space to be brighter or darker, I can compensate the same way we did before. I can come up here and grab my exposure compensation and darken everything by, let's say, a stop and a third, right? So we'll see here, it's going to make it darker. Now it's a 500th of a second, right? And I can come back and fill in with my flash, right? So again, the flash is at 0 now, which means that it's probably going to be a tiny bit underexposed, right? Because we want to give the flash enough extra power to compensate. So basically, I think that's it, right? And that's going to be basically our compensation. And now we've got a proper flash exposure on Marissa within the parameters of the camera. Now, one thing that did happen here, because I have my camera set as such, is that it went to 200th of a second, right? Because I'm not in a mode that does high-speed sync. So I turned that stuff off because I charge extra for that class. So not everybody has high-speed sync, so I turn it off. So high-speed sync would allow you to go above your normal sync speed. So it might have kept it at 320, right? But because I don't have that on, my camera knows enough not to go over 200th of a second, or else I won't be able to sync properly with the flash. So my maximum shutter speed is going to be 200th of a second here, and it's going to adjust my aperture either way, right? To get me so that everything balances. Does that make sense? Oh, that was easier than I thought. Any questions? Yeah.
So you're always starting with the ISO yourself, though, no matter what.
So that's generally how I work, because I come from the days of film where you had to do that. So are you usually just starting with your ISO? Am I starting with my ISO? Yeah, I am, right? And you know, I started on the days of film where you couldn't change your ISO, right? So I was trained that way. But also I come from early digital where, you know, anything above like 400 ISO could be garbage. Nowadays, it's better, right? I still feel like you want to be as low as possible for many reasons. But, you know, that's the kind of thing where I wouldn't want to like have it jump up to 1600 ISO just to get me a little more depth of field when I didn't need it, right? And you can with auto ISO. So let's talk about auto ISO. Auto ISO. So if we go into auto ISO, oops, or we take a random picture. We could also do that.
Oh, so sad.
Let's see, auto ISO. Where are you? There we go. Okay. Auto ISO is incredibly useful, okay? Basically, you can set your camera to manual if you wanted to. Let's say, for instance, I know I want 125th of a second, and I know I want f5.6. I don't know why. Maybe that's my lucky numbers. Maybe it's my birthday, whatever. That's basically what you want. Your auto ISO can compensate for you, right? It's that extra step. And since cameras are tremendously good at higher ISO now, you can determine based on your camera where you're comfortable. So let's say for the purposes of this, I think I set it at maximum of 1600 ISO. So it will not go over that, right? No matter what happens here. So right now, let me turn the flash off. I'm at 500th of a second, 5.6, and it's choosing ISO 400, right? Because I am in program automatic. No, I have compensation, sorry. Take the compensation off. 1/320th of a second, 4.5. Everybody who's watching was like, hold on, that wasn't the same settings. 320 of a second, 4.5, 400 ISO. It's choosing that, just like when I was at 400 ISO before, it chose the same settings, right? So I take this picture, it's going to be fine. We already saw this one. Nice, right? If the light changes, now the camera can think multiple ways. So if the light dims a bunch, now it's still keeping me at 400, right? Because there's still room within the safe bounds of the camera. It's at f4, it's 125th of a second. It didn't change the ISO because the camera's thinking to itself, that's going to have less impact, right? And we can just go like that. And again, if you're just shooting, like, let's say events or anything like that, and that is the case, fine. If you knew that, oh, no, I can't have 1/25th of a second, I need at least 200. Well, guess what? You should be in shutter priority, right? Because now you know that, right? But if you're kind of, hey, here we are shooting, so, by the way, you can see too that we're picking up a little bit of the house lights because this light's on her, but this is the rest of the room, right? Which is cool, right? So it's actually picking that up there because we opened up a bit of the exposure for her.
Hi, Mom.
Hey, Mom. All right, so
Well, the funny part is your mom just commented on a random video on the other channel asking where Marissa is. So you found her, Janice. You found Marissa.
She's on the wrong channel.
She took off the Where's Waldo hat.
Why are we surprised that Marissa's mom's on the wrong channel? Runs in the family. Okay. So, flash, right? Look at that.
That's my mom smile.
Boom. Boom, right? Flash is set on 0. It's just filling in, right? That's what a TTL flash will do for us. Now, here's the thing, right? So if you've been around for a while, you know that a lot of times this is the technique that we haven't got to yet. Sometimes people like to use the flash to clean up the shot. That's like one of the most common things we see here. In that case, we would leave the camera the way it is, and we would take the flash exposure compensation and we would dial it down a little bit. So we'll just, again, the camera's going to give us the proper exposure that it thinks is correct, right? But then the flash is going to fill in a little bit less than full, right? So now, a little bit bright, casual, right? Happy, sad.
The TTL's reading the steep, though,
Yeah, that's it. Right? And we could do any amount of flash we want, right? I could bring it down a little more, although we're almost at the bottom of the flash, but let's say we go 2 stops under, right? And now we're just getting a little kiss of light from the flash, right? Subtle. Because remember, she's being completely lit with this light, right? Now you can start playing with it if you want, right? I could come over here and turn the whole thing down. Oh, regular exposure compensation. Boom. Now we're two-thirds of a stop under exposure on exposure compensation, 2 stops under on flash exposure compensation. The whole thing's going to have a little bit more darkness to it, a little bit of richness, right? Let's say we want a little more flash to clean it up. I turn my flash back up, right? Now my flash is at 1.5 under. This is where we can really start to finesse our light and get it exactly where we want it. We can, what's that?
It's at the lowest power possible.
Yeah, it is. All right, so let's go full. So now the flash is giving us the exposure that's correct, right? But our regular exposure compensation is underexposing. That's why no matter what I do, she still seems a bit dark. In order to get her brighter, we have to go up over the flash. Now we're at plus 0.4 of a stop, right? And now she's cleaned up, right? In order to clean it up, the flash has to be over the exposure of the ambient light. So you can either leave the flash neutral and turn the ambient light down, or you can turn the flash up, right? Effectively is what we're doing. Hopefully that makes sense, because what I'm doing here, to not be confusing, is I'm literally underexposing. This is where the weird math gets in. You've lost it. She's gone. She's gone. All right, let's start over. I'm just going to roll back because I just want to see how this works. See, it's more complicated, right? You thought professional used M. No, this is the real meat right here. Learning how to use exposure compensation is so key. Here we have the camera telling us, here's the proper exposure, Daniel. Why don't you just use it? Well, you know, I like to mess around. So I'm going to say, you know what? That exposure is fine, but I want the room a little bit darker, right? So I've turned my camera's exposure compensation down, 2/3 of a stop. That is going to result in an underexposed image. Remember that the camera with TTL is talking to the flash. So if I leave the flash at 0, it will still be underexposed because the flash is exposing to equal to the camera. So in order to make the proper exposure, I have to overexpose with the flash, right? So now I have the correct exposure on her face, but a little bit more of it is flash than ambient. This is great if you're in weird light. I mean, we happen to be in beautiful light, so it's you know, it's kind of, but if you were in like weird, like fluorescent or warm light and you want to kind of clean it up a little bit, right? This allows the flash to do that. It was very common that I would do it at events, and I would just keep it just barely over to clean up those terrible fluorescents and stuff. You know, nowadays digital cameras are pretty good. There's auto white balance, all those stuff. But you know, if you're trying to clean up your light, a flash is a good way to do it, right? Any other questions? You figured it out? I'm gonna have you up here next week teaching this, so you better.
I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
the best part about this is you guys paid for all your pixels, right?
Right.
So you can go and trial and error this, but just understand what happens with every shot and go, well, why is it too dark? Why is it over? And if you're mixing a strobe in with your ambient, you have two types of exposures going on, your ambient and your strobe. So Dan is saying underexpose your ambient so the environment is dark. So now we want the basic majority of the exposure to be the strobe. Well, the strobe has to go over that exposure we're telling the camera. So now we're at the exposure we want on the strobe, underexposing the ambient.
Right.
So let's say you're in this blue environment. You don't want that blue going all over the place. Cut out the blue by underexposing it. But now she's too dark. Now I put the strobe in there. Well, the strobe goes, oh, you want it dark. And we're like, no, strobe. Add it. Add up some more power.
Can you kill that?
You want that warm one off?
Yeah. Can you put your back to the audience again?
Yeah.
Do you want to put the blue one overhead? Do you want to cut those out?
I just want these as my only lights. Is that possible?
You want the bridge?
The bridge, yeah.
All right, hang on. Do some filler. Hang on.
All right, so Seth is kind of adjusting the house lights for us so we can mess around a bit. So again, to get something a little more complicated, let's say that we're in a situation where we want the store to come up, right? But we also want to balance with the subject. If I'm shooting towards Marissa now with no flash and no nan light, because you know, why would I use the light that's right next to me? Right? So I can decide, right? So obviously if I just leave this in P, right, it will, well, if I turn the flash off, forget that happened. And I just leave this, yeah. Now I'm at 30, okay, so I guess I set it higher than 1600. I said 16. It's giving me 3200 ISO. It's giving me f4 at a 25th of a second, right? And what that's gonna give me is basically Marissa's face exposed properly, right? And the background's super bright. But now, again, so I'm giving you more of a practical use of this. If I throw my exposure compensation in, and I bring it down, well, you can do 4 stops in this camera. Oh, wow, you can do 5 stops. Okay, so 5 stops. It's giving me an 80th of a second at f4, 60th of a second, f4, 500 ISO, right? Now she's dark, right? Now I can turn my flash on. And again, I can leave it where it is. It's going to basically be underexposed by a bit. Yeah, right? But then I can turn it up. Of course, the flash can only do 3 stops, so we'll see. So there we go. Now I can't balance them perfectly because this camera amazingly gives me 5 stops of exposure. Composition, the flash only gives me 3. So I'm just going to go into the camera and give myself 3 so it's balanced. Plus we don't want the background to be so dark anyways. Right, and now we have a lit shot, right? Marissa, I mean, obviously it's flashy. It's fashion. This is fashion, guys, right? We have a shot where Marissa's lit up and the store has exposure behind her, right? I didn't have to use any kind of meter. I didn't put it in manual, right? I was able to do it because I understand how to do the compensation, right? I could also expose basically the store brighter, right? I could bring the store up if I wanted to. Right now it's at, yeah, sure. Okay, so let's say it, well, in a practical way, let's kind of zoom back a bit so we can see more. Nope, that's in. I'm at -3, unfortunately, I can't see that, unfortunately. Exposure compensation. If I adjust it at different levels of exposure compensation, I can start bringing the light up in the space, right? I can determine what I want my room to look like behind her, right? Then once I'm there, I can look at it and go, okay, -1.7, right? So I know on my flash, I need to give myself 1.7. Treat myself to 1.7. Oh, double shot there, right? And boom, again, we're exposed properly. The room looks fine. If I wanted to look better and I happen to have a softbox behind me, I could just go like this. You know? You know, I could do that and then it'll look a little bit nicer. Oh, that, it went blue because it's bouncing, right? But you know, you see how it's working. It's kind of like balancing off each other, right? And you have to kind of, you know, trust it as much as you can and then also understand how it works and make your adjustment as you go. If we want the background to be brighter, we can adjust that. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to give myself a tiny bit more flash power because it's bouncing off something, so the TTL is getting tricky. Right? Or I can give it less, one or the other. Okay, I want to turn it the wrong way. Okay, here we go. Right. And then there we go, right? We got a clean bounce. We got the store lit up, right? And we're basically there, right? Now, obviously, you can do the same thing in manual if you understand that, but if you're learning and you're trying to learn how to mix light, this is a great way to experiment with it. Just keep track of what you're doing, right? How am I using my exposure compensation? What is the camera thinking the correct exposure is? And then kind of adjust for that. That make sense? And again, I can also bring this up to 0. Well, that's gonna be overexposed because of the flash, but that's okay. Let's put everything back to 0. Ooh.
You gotta go over what you're doing.
I'm resetting everything to 0. Okay. So 0 means that I'm just letting the meter and the camera decide the exposure I want, that it wants to be, right? I had turned it up and down. And what that was doing was changing, basically, not that one. What that was doing was changing the background, you know, and the light on her, depending on where we had it set. Okay, question.
Someone's asking, what mode would you use when shooting on location, indoor, moving through different rooms quickly? I guess changing light.
So if I'm shooting in a location where the light's changing quickly, I'm going to use a programmed automatic with a flash on top. In almost all situations, because what you're describing sounds like I'm doing some kind of event or something, right? If I'm going into a location, let's say I'm in a museum and I'm shooting pieces in the museum and I'm going from space to space and I got a tripod, I'm going to put it on aperture priority to make sure I can control my depth of field. But if I'm going room to room and I'm photographing people or things going on, I got a cake, right? Maybe there's a cake, maybe people are dancing. There could be one of those things that you put, what do you call that thing you put on your leg?
Oh, come on.
And you like throw it.
A girdle? Garter? Yeah.
Garter. Maybe I'm throwing a bouquet at you guys. Everybody dodges and nobody wants to catch it. You know, you're in P mode for that, right? Everybody scatters, it lands on the ground. You know, I'll catch it, don't worry. All right. Does that make sense so far?
That makes sense.
Let's end with a good picture so I can have a thumbnail for next time.
You want blue on the crowd?
Yeah, let's put the blue on the crowd. Well, I'm going to shoot this way. The crowd doesn't want to be in the picture. I'll have to charge them for it. All right, any questions while we're kind of, oh, look at that. That's a weird angle. I wasn't going to point it that way. The camera just happened to be that way. I love the Marissa just gets in front of the camera no matter where it is.
I'm like,
Such a pro.
an actor always knows
Yes,
the lens.
such a pro.
This is attention seeking.
All right. Okay, so again, I've got a subject here. That subject is Marissa. And what we know Marissa, right? Come a little closer. Okay, stop. All right, what mode am I in?
Shut up.
Well, what do you want? What should I be in? Is that what you meant? Okay, no. What mode should I be in? Shutter, yes. Were you here earlier? Come on. No, you could be. You.
Yes, I'm gonna say nice try. Maybe another time.
Pay attention. No, you could be in program automatic if you want. But earlier we said that, something like this maybe would be in shutter, right? Because we don't care if the background's in focus. What we care about is that Marissa is, shall we say, energetic? Yeah. So I'm going to go, I'm going to take it, and not blurry. We don't want to be blurry. Unless you take my special Instagram course. All right. You've seen those things. Look at how ethereal this is. All right. I'm going to turn this off. If you want to get blurry pictures, guys, just shake the camera. You don't need to take a course for that. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm teaching a class. All right, thumbnail. I always put you on the wrong side. So we're going to shoot a thumbnail here. This could be for the, no, come this way because we have to have space. Okay, good. That way we don't have to add a space using AI. All right, we're going to do this. All right. This is the Nanlite Forza 500. Did I say that already? All right, 7 cents. Boom, thank you. Yeah, that's good. Look that way like you're kind of like demure. Chin down a little bit. Yeah. All right, good. All right, so we're at 125, 5.6, ISO 400, right? Marissa's looking demure. Didn't use a flash, but it's on the camera, so I'm still charging for it. That's how that works. Any other questions? Nothing. So if I start asking you all questions, you're gonna be able to answer them. Oh, he's got a question. You have no idea what's going on.
On the automatic ISO, but I never saw the ISO change. It was always 400 on
Yeah, you know why? Because I know what I'm doing. No. It did. It did. So what he said was he never saw the ISO change. It did change a little bit. It went to 3200 ISO when I was shooting this way. But yeah, because the camera again is trying to find a sweet spot. It doesn't want to give you, I mean, you could say, well, it could go to F4 and drop the ISO down, right? But if you get to that point where you're thinking that could be what you want to do, maybe that's when you want to switch over to manual or switch over to manual ISO anyways, right? Because if I did that, I am on auto ISO. This is the first time I've ever been on auto ISO, by the way. It's kind of freeing. Oh, I don't know how to turn it off. There we go. All right, so if I want to turn this off, I'm going to go to 100 ISO because I'm old-fashioned. And the camera now switched. F4 is 60th of a second. And again, 60th is a little slow for me. And why did it go to 60th and 50th rather? I'm sorry, I said 50, 60, but it went to 50 because I'm not in the right mode. I spent all my time giving you a hard time and I didn't actually switch. That was P, so you were right. That was the right mode. Look at that. In the end,
Wow.
you were correct.
Don't ever
I apologize. You can from now on, you teach the class.
and it's up there forever.
Yep, forever you see that I messed up. All right, but what does that tell you? The camera's smarter than I am. I think we all knew that from the beginning. All right, so look this way a little bit. Come this way, tiny little bit towards the light. Okay, so it's telling me 60th of a second, f4.5, 100 ISO now. And there we go, right? She's got like something in her eye or something. You look at your
It's so bright.
she's-
Okay,
yeah,
tell
yeah.
me what.
All right, yeah. You don't have to you look like kind of down, like you're like, oh yeah, I'm demure. Notice too the tension of her nose at the edge of the frame. That'll be for my framing class that we'll do next time.
You're asking about bulb. Talk about bulb for me.
Bulb. Okay, let's talk about bulb. So if you only have bulb and you don't have T, I apologize. Because we all know that T is better. All right. So bulb mode. So Bulb mode on your camera is when basically when you press the shutter, it remains open until you release it. That's going to be for long exposures generally. Ideally, you're going to use some kind of a cable release or a remote so you don't shake the camera because you got to leave your finger on it. What I was joking about T was not a lot, but some older cameras had both, and T would be when you press it in, it stays, and then you press it again, it closes. That's the difference. But bulb is just that. So if I go to bulb, then it would just, bulb is basically a manual mode, you know? Do I have bulb on this?
Bulb is really for an exposure past your maximum exposure, like those slowest
Yeah.
shutter speed you can get.
Yeah, now
right?
cameras go really slow. So I would only use bulb if you're doing, so actually, you know when we used bulb? Remember when we went to Comic-Con? And I covered the lens. Yeah, so that's another class. But bulb is cool for stuff where you need a really long exposure that your camera can't do it naturally. But I would use a cable release with that if you're going to, or a remote release.
It's also really good if you're into something like light painting, where you need the shutter to stay open and you're
Yeah.
going to control the source and then end the
Yeah, and you want to end it exactly on the exact moment. Yeah. So,
it's on almost all cameras that's the end of your shutter speed, because it's
Yeah.
the longest shutter speed in theory.
yeah. Or some cameras do have it on the dial.
The only thing
Did your
about bulb,
camera have it on the dial, Akiva? You had a B, right? Akiva? Yeah, Akiva's camera had it.
the thing about bulb though is it is the least consistent you're ever going to have, because
Yeah.
you know, if you're just doing long exposure, you say it's a third of a second, it'll always be a third of a second.
Yeah, and you
A
count.
bulb, if you're trying to stay consistent,
I would only use it if it's really long, like 15,
Right.
20 seconds, and get really good at counting it.
right?
So bulb is not as commonly used today.
It's a cool thing to have though, for sure.
Right. Spend a bunch of money on neutral density filters. That's also why. Yep. So if you're shooting in the middle of the day or something and you want to, do a long exposure to get, like, let's say, water blurry, that's another reason to use it. Most cameras, like this one, goes to 11.
You know, like majority of this audience doesn't get that reference, right?
Yeah. No, they do. All right. I'm going to see how slow this goes. 30 seconds is how slow this goes. No, you can't. I couldn't shoot at 30 seconds in here. I'd have to get a neutral density filter. At least in shutter priority.
But I will say though, if you're doing something like bulb for, let's say, like Astro, you're gonna
Yeah.
want to tripod it, keep it locked, and you're not gonna want to touch the shutter yourself because you will shake the camera, then jarring the entire image. You know.
All right, just because I have it on top of the camera, we'll use the flash one more time. I'm just over here taking pictures. All right, so I'm going to turn this down all the way, -3 stops exposure. Marissa's going to, yep, good. There you go, with and without the flash. We'll put that on Instagram. You tell me which one I use the flash. All right, questions, thoughts, concerns? No concerns. Okay. Usually there's a concern. Oh, and I went over. See, you didn't even think I could do 10 minutes. Any questions, guys? Sorry. Yes. Uh-oh.
Most of what I shoot is stable.
I'm going to walk up. Yep, go ahead.
So I mostly everything that I shoot is stable. So
Okay.
it's architecture, studio.
Yep.
Light is consistent. So I haven't been using. But I want to set the ISO. I want to so the
Yep.
mode. If I set the ISO, say 200,
Yep.
it's going to stay.
That's correct. So the question is, you're shooting things that are stable, they're not moving. You want to try to use different modes like program or something. If you don't put it in auto ISO, then it will stay wherever you leave it.
Okay.
You can set a range. So if you were like, well, I'm okay with 400, but nothing fast higher than that, you could set that. But if you know where you want your ISO, then I would just leave it in manual ISO.
Because I think I was just doing the
Yeah.
Euro, and at times the
Yeah, that is,
graininess.
yes. So when you first get a camera, generally their auto ISO is set at the maximum ISO that the camera goes to. So like this one, because I had not used auto ISO before, I wasn't kidding about that. It was set at 64,743 ISO is the maximum. And I was like, I'm not going to leave it there because I can't believe that's going to look good. Although maybe it does. I mean, I don't, who am I to judge? I'm judging. It's not going to look good for what I'm doing with that. So I was like, no. So I brought it down to, I thought 1,600, but I guess 3,200. So yeah, I just don't use auto ISO in those cases. Lock it in your ISO, use the other modes, and it will correct your shutter speed and your aperture. And if you're not moving and you're on a tripod, you're good.
Yeah. The other thing about all this stuff, especially auto ISO, is if you know it's going to jump your ISO because you're choking it for light with faster shutter speeds or closing your aperture, ease up one of those to get it to ease up the ISO. If you know it's going to jump your ISO and you know why, then dial it back so it doesn't. You know, that's where you got to kind of do what you want it to do rather than make it do what it's doing. You know.
The unfortunate thing is most of what I
Right.
do, I have time to.
Yeah, but you're better off doing in almost all cases, unless something's moving. If you're on a tripod, having a longer exposure is probably not a big deal, especially if you're shooting architecture and stuff. That would not be a problem.
Don't use high speed sync.
I don't. Why don't I use high speed sync? I have to charge extra for that, and Adorama cannot afford it. No, generally I don't use high speed sync in demos unless it's about high speed sync, because not everybody has it. So I like to be more natural. The thing about high speed sync is it's not necessary in this kind of thing, right? It's for when you're in really bright situations, but you want to shoot wide open, right? It's not that bright in here. If I was outside in the street and I wanted to shoot at f4 and it was the middle of the day, I'd have to use high speed sync with a flash, right? But in here, there's really no reason to. I'd have to like fake the situation in order to make it work. But believe me, I've done it.
There's also a lot of trade-offs. A lot of people leave it in high speed sync and think it's like an end all, but you're shoving a lot of power through the strobe for no reason, putting wear and tear on the strobe for no reason. It's also pulsating, creating a long flash duration can cause blur itself.
Right.
So there's all these things that you're trading for the hope of high speed sync giving you a shallow look in a bright ambient situation, which we are not in. So why do it?
Yeah.
Plus, you'd have to probably move the light closer to compensate for the power distribution.
Yeah, so it has its point. It has its place, just like any tool. If you're in a bright space, you want to have that shallowed up the field. I think it's a better option in most cases than using, let's say, ND filters, which is what people would do in the past, because you got it, right? Yeah. But in here, it's just not really something that we need to use. Are you shooting outside a lot? Have you used it before, or you just see people use it? Like,
Yeah, just hear different. Some people say they don't use it at all.
oh yeah, I mean, anybody who says they don't use something at all, I mean, maybe in their work, but that doesn't mean it's bad, right? Every tool that we have at our disposal is there for a reason. Some people use it, some people don't. You got to kind of think about the work that you're doing. I don't use it here because we don't need to. I'd have to, like I said, I'd have to force myself into a situation to make it bright enough, I should say, in order to make me have to need high speed sync. So that's why I don't use it.
And if it's not a situation that needs it, it can often be inconsistent.
Yeah.
So it's another thing, right? So it's important to know the tools and how those tools actually work and why they're doing what they do, you know, which is what this whole demo is about.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Other questions?
So in other words, it's just pointless to use it.
In here, in this situation.
Right. But no, I understand. But what I'm saying is, so will it do anything wrong if you end up using it? Like,
If you have your camera turned on to make high-speed sync activate, it won't activate unless you need it. So no, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having it set. Although some flashes you have to turn it on the flash. So I wouldn't necessarily leave it on the flash because it can maybe wear it down faster. I mean, there's definitely side effects to it that, I mean, I can't speak to every individual flash, but I would try to only use things when they're needed. Turn a tool on when you need it, turn it off when you don't. Just like freeze mode on Profoto, you get a bit of a higher, faster flash duration, but it's also can shift the color slightly, so I don't leave it in freeze mode unless I know I need that higher flash duration. So same thing. Other questions? No, nothing. All right. Wow, we made it through. Thanks, guys. It was a little rough at the beginning, but you know it often is. So next time we're here is that the 13th, 12th, 13th, 12th February. No, I'm here at the end of the month, 29th. I'll be here on the 29th.
Today's the 29th.
I'll be here on the so it's the 13th then, 12th. Yeah, the 12th. We'll be here on February 12th. I will be. Okay, Seth has all the rest of them. I only announce myself. Come on now. I don't even know where I'm here. I don't know. This is Marissa Dot Roper, not just Marissa underscore Roper or just Marissa Roper, because those are different people. Marissa Dot Roper. Seth is last X witness. The X is silent. And I'm Daniel Norton, and he'll give you all the other announcements.
If you guys want, follow that, scan this QR code here if you're watching some playback for the other channel where we do all the Love the Live demos on February 5th. The next demo is coming up. Is going to be Ab Cisse in here. So, and you can catch me every Monday on that QR code. I'll save you from this, okay? I'll do what I can, guys. All right? Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one. Subscribe. Bye.